Our population in this area or at large in California, the African American Muslim population, by comparison to the immigrant Muslim population, is actually smaller than the general numbers that are given nationally speaking. I would hazard a guess, maybe the African American Muslim population in California may be about 10 or 15% of the Muslim population of California, whereas nationally speaking, it's probably about 35 or 45% of the national Muslim population are African American Muslims. That you'll find most strongly on the Eastern Seaboard. You'll find them in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, places like that. There's a very large Muslim community in Atlanta, Georgia, and that has to do with the flow of Islam in America itself. The Nation of Islam, which is really the predator Islamic community in terms of African Americans. Islam rather moved somewhat in waves. The start of the Nation of Islam, as it were actually in Detroit. That was temple number 1. To give you an idea, we in Oakland, we were temple number 77. Okay, Malcolm's temple was temple number 7, right? And that was in New York. So the life of Islam for African Americans was centered right in the Midwest, Detroit, Chicago area. Then it really became much larger on the East Coast. And then with the influx and the interaction between immigrant Muslims and African American Muslims, that also gave a rise to more African American Muslims. And then the movement of Islam vis-a-vis the Nation of Islam came west, and the populations are therefore thinner the further away you go from the Midwest and from the East Coast. But in general, in California, I would say anywhere between 10 and 15% of the Muslim population are African American, and I would say about 35-45% in the country at large. Yes, the influence of immigrant Muslims on the African American Muslim population is significant. It's very important to understand. I know that we're not trying to elaborate on the full gist of the Nation of Islam history, but it cannot be ignored if you want to understand the context for African American Muslims in the milieu of Islam in America. The Nation of Islam itself was begun by an immigrant Muslim. It wasn't begun by Elijah Muhammad. Someone came and taught Elijah Muhammad the message that Elijah Muhammad in turn taught to the followers of his for 40 years. Now, when Malcolm, as you know that history, when Malcolm separated, as it were, from the Nation of Islam and opened the doors and the minds and the eyes of many African Americans to the idea that there is an Islam that is not racially based. And that brought an opportunity for many immigrant Muslims to have greater contact with African American Muslims. And I should say that Wallace D. Muhammad was the one that advised Malcolm of that reality before Malcolm came to that reality, as he expressed in his own autobiography. That's Malcolm's autobiography. So really, it was really after the transition of the Nation of Islam to mainstream Islam post-1975 that really sent a wave of African American Muslims really around the world seeking the right understanding or an understanding of al-Islam post-Nation of Islam. And then, of course, with the influx of immigration that came to this country and the openness of African American Muslims to thought that comes from the Middle East and the like, it has taken and made a significant impact on African American Muslims, but I can say also, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. An example is to say that I myself was the imam for many immigrant Muslims who had really lost contact with their Islam because they never were converted to Islam. They, like many of us as Americans who may have been Christians, you were just born into a Christian family, and so if somebody asks you, are you a Christian? You say, yes, I'm a Christian. Well, the same thing applies to Muslims. There were many Muslims from India, Pakistan, Arabia, Egypt, and the like, who came to America as students or as business persons and otherwise. And when they came in contact with African Americans who were enthusiastic and excited about being Muslim, that was a new phenomenon for them. Not only being enthusiastic and excited about al-Islam, but that there were African American Muslims. That had an impact on them, and many of them became new Muslims as a result of the contact with African American Muslims. So there's been a mutual influence. Well, when you say what is the difference, I think it's very important to understand that those distinctions are very natural. Indeed, they are actually inscribed in the Quran itself. God says in the Quran that He has made you tribes and nations that you might know one another. And one translator takes the word ta'arafu to say, not that you might despise one another. Your differences are inherent, they are natural. I mean for those differences to be, and I mean for you to honor those differences, and I mean for you by your historic experience to mutually share with each other what is gained from your experience that could not be gained from the experience of your counterpart. And when you share, you enrich each other. So the ethnic distinctions in communities are quite natural. And so you're going to find an Arab Muslim community and a Pakistani Muslim community, an African American Muslim community, and one day, if it doesn't exist already, a European American Muslim community. And it's simply because culturally and ethnically, we do have different tastes. We do have different backgrounds. We do have different traditions. We have different kinds of humor, different kinds of aesthetic tastes and the like. Well, God made us that way, you know. Islam does not deny, ethnic respect and ethnic dignity. Islam encourages that. What it does not allow is ethnocentrism. It does not allow tribalism. It does not allow racism. It does not allow taking those differences and making them the standard by which you decide who is better and who is worse. So and to that extent, then Islam is the same, but it's just simply manifests differently among each ethnic group. We have to take a step back about the idea of assimilation. You can say that that's the American way, but in reality, that's not the American way, in our view. The American way is for you to be who you are. When you come to America, the real invitation of America is for you to come and have the freedom to express your own identity, your own self, your own essence, your own reality, your own culture, and you don't have to be like anybody else in order to be validated. This is the original thought in America, in American ideals. But somewhere along the line in the 20th century and later there, Americanization did become the ideal for all of the reasons that geopolitics and something else may dictate. But that's not the original frame of the American ideal. It's for you to come to America and be free to practice your way of life, your religion, your traditions and the like, and not have to change. You understand this? Maybe by just one vote, we all may be speaking German, because there was some idea there has to be some national language and the like. So the point is that the distinctions are really respected in the fundamental paradigm of America, and that's what we follow. We subscribe to that idea. As long as we understand that we know that there's one universal Islam, there is one universal Islam, but this universal Islam is articulated and is refracted through the ethnic experience of every individual. Me, for example, I am rooted in the slavery experience of this country. A European is not real. A European Muslim is not rooted in the slave experience of this country. And there were Muslims who were slaves during antebellum slavery. So my history comes out of that experience. And as a result of that, Islam, when I personally